So yeah, it's good to have you, Aquaman. We finished Atlantis. That must
Woohoo!
that must be a relief, right?
Yeah,
There
I'm
was
very happy that we finished it. Yes,
there was so much that could have gone wrong, but at the end of the day, it looks like
They-
everything's gone right.
everything gone right at the last minute, and it happened. But like, there was a lot of month of debates and people wanting to do it later versus earlier. That could have, and people wanting to find a middle ground that could have made it go wrong. But thankfully, everything went right. The community came to consensus, and that's the beauty of decentralization, right?
Exactly. That people can have their disagreements, but it somehow all kind of figures itself out in the end.
It was,
It
yeah.
was interesting. There's still one guy mining the old chain.
Yeah, I'm like, who's this guy? Like, does he not like know that he can't sell them? Like, there's no market that would accept his old BTC. Like, I don't even know if he's actually mining. Like, he's the only one on that network, on the
So
old network.
so like I saw I couldn't understand like the significance of how much this guy is like putting towards the network. Is this a significant amount, or is it just like one guy with his computer at home?
He just has a lot. He has a few rigs at home and he's mining, but they're not like. It's at a point where when you reach out to all the miners to update their nodes, the reason is because you don't want a consensus split, right? But at some point, when you have like that one little guy who doesn't update his node and stuff, it becomes out of the scope of what we can do, because you try to reach out to them, they don't update it, but they have such a small hash rate that it doesn't really do anything, and it's just like a loss to them, because if they do mine, if they do like um you know get a block or something and they get awarded etc on the old chain, they can't sell it on exchange because all the exchanges have the new node and stuff, so they would reject it. So
Right. Yeah.
so
It seems like a waste. Just I guess that there's just nothing you can do. This guy's wasting his own resources. He's not paying attention.
yeah, it would resolve itself in the end when he tries to figure out, okay, now what can I do with my etc that I mined, and then like, oh shit, they went through a hard fork and stuff, I missed out on that. And like, people tried to reach out to, like, after he tried to reach out to him on Twitter, I believe, and like they have a website but they don't respond and
Yeah.
stuff.
And what I like is that there's this responsibility in the community to like help out everyone, right? Like even this little, like, nothing burger miner, people can see it, are paying attention, are trying to reach out to this guy. Hey, save your whatever $10 of mining power,
Yeah.
put it somewhere else. Um, the way that all kind of collects together, I like that. I also like how there's been a lot of response towards this Atlantis token, that out of nowhere people started talking about, hey, there's this token, it's going to be coming as part of the fork. And
Yeah.
it seemed like it was a confusion play, or somebody trying to
They were banking on.
capitalize on the name. What do you think happened there? Does this still exist? Is it a problem?
It's not a problem anymore. Well, I don't know. They're probably, still running with it, but like we've had these kind of attacks in the past. Like before Discord, we had Slack, and on Slack, people would like let's say you're a member of our ETC Slack community, people would DM you and say, oh, ETC going through a hard fork. Here's a link to my Ether wallet to move your ETC elsewhere, and it's like a link to a fake my Ether wallet. Like it's like it looks like the real thing, but then you get scammed. You put your private key in, they log it, and they have access to your account. They move your ETC for you. So similar kind of thing that we see right now, like where I mean, and like just to further go in that story, because of these attacks and because Slack didn't allow us to have any tool to moderate and block these kind of people like effectively, we moved to Discord, which has a lot of bots for like moderation and stuff to stop these kind of scams. But the Atlantis E fork is like without even knowing anything about it, and I know I'm being biased here, I know it's a scam because when you try to capitalize on a hard fork name to come up with like, oh, we have tokens and stuff, it's a scam. Like you came like 3 weeks ahead of time to try to sell people on your shit token using the Atlantis hard fork name. I bet you there's going to be an Agartha token in the future by probably the same people as some other people. Like
It's just
scammers.
not as good as a name. Atlantis is a much better name than Agartha. So hopefully,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
like,
that might be a good strategy in the future to come up with
yeah,
really poor names for forks to prevent any of this confusion, right? Like no one wants to do the Agartha token.
or
But so there's no way, like at the end of the day, this is another ERC20. They're
mhm,
using it as a distribution method, right? Like they're saying, hey, this is a way for them to spread the token out. And
mhm,
is the scam part again? We both don't know enough about it, and
right.
that should be communication to the audience that if you've been thinking that this is an official token, there's nothing official. There's nothing part of this being part of the hard fork. It's
It's a
just
scam.
it's just some other entity that is doing it. Um, what is the reason they're doing it is because this is a moment for them to get noticed, to get distribution. And where's the scam part come in? That fake link you're mentioning, is that the only scamming part?
Um, I really don't know what they're scamming with, but I believe if they have any link for a thing where you can claim your tokens by either
Your private key.
accessing a wallet, entering your private key, shit like that, that's like the first sign you shouldn't do any of that. Like, because that's how people try to get access to your ETC and stuff. Or maybe they're just trying to sell you their token, and that by itself is a scam because what is the token going to do? Are you going to go to Atlantis? Are you going to meet Aquaman now? Like, what are you going to do with that token? You
Who's
know,
developing it, right? Yeah. At the end of the
yeah.
day,
I mean, and
who's
it
at
came
that?
exactly. It came 2 weeks before, and we're like, the ETC community, we're not really big on ICOs, and that there can be a use case for tokens, but I don't really find it that appealing, tokens versus the actual base currency, but there could be a use case for them. But coming 2 weeks before a hard fork with an Atlantis token, come on. Like, who are you trying to fool? Like, we've seen a lot of shit in this community and in like the wider crypto community that we know when something has, stinks.
So what's nice is this is a learning lesson in that it seems that the people who would be most susceptible are those who are not necessarily completely out of the loop, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you've bought ETC at one time on Coinbase and
Mm-hmm.
then you never like really interacted anymore, you don't pay attention to hard forks and whatnot, you're fine. You're not going to somehow magically
Right.
get scammed by this situation. On the flip side, if you're deep in the Atlantis community, ETC community, sorry, you know what the hard fork really means. You know that there was no new coins. So it's this gray area of people who they're reading up, they're trying to learn more, and that's who gets susceptible to these kind of moments.
100%. Yeah. And that's where the scammers make a living on people who like, they know a little bit, but they're not going to explore a lot because people have lives and we're like the only nerds in this space that care about this shit. But yeah, I mean, and that's where like scammers come into play and try to fool people and try to, steal their money either by you putting your private key or you buying a token that has literally no value or no utility to it. And, just because you're trying to, bank on the name confusion and stuff. So it was unfortunate, but I wasn't really surprised. And I'm glad that, we had the verified Twitter account, Ethercluster, retweeting and saying do not accept it and stuff. And we try to like all the time, like people come to the Discord, ask questions and stuff, and if they asked about it, we would educate them.
Yeah, it amounts to another vector of a social attack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not one that threatens the network, but it might, give a bad taste to people coming into the system, some new entrants
Right.
into the environment. So you must be pumped. You've been traveling all over the world. You were
Oh man.
And now you've got a few more coming up.
Yeah. First of all, let me say I'm very happy I'm in New York this month because I'm like I missed my apartment. I miss, my bed and stuff. I've been traveling for a month and a half before this. And um after that we'll be traveling for 2 weeks. So first of all, before New York this month, we were at East Berlin with the ETC Cooperative and ETC Labs. Um, from my perspective, I think East Berlin was a great success from a community advocacy perspective. Like we talked to a lot of developers, a lot of um, consensus hubs and startups that are building on Ethereum that are like, they're interested with ETC as well. They want to have conversation. We also had one of the Whiteblock, which is a startup that does client testing, among other things. So different clients like Parity and Gap can like communicate with each other, and you can do a lot of tests, generate transactions, and it's useful if you're having a hard fork, you want to implement changes, you want to make sure that the consensus doesn't break on any of the clients. What they did was they built a test net with Akwi, and I helped a little bit with them, called Nazgul. Nazgul comes from the name of like the ring wraith from Lord of the Rings. The 9 Nazgul. Basically, it was a temporary test net for ETC, so we can, with Atlantis changes in it, where we try to break the network by adding a lot of transactions, see what is the limit of that network. And Whiteblock, they championed it, and it was great because they're used by everyone in Ethereum, like all the Ethereum developers, like Pantheon, which is another story we can talk about later. You have Get Classic right now, they're using it. You have Parity, you have EOS as well, they're using Whiteblock. Their testing framework is really good, and so the fact that they built Nazgul for ETC as a test net is very, like, really, really cool. Like, I was really grateful for that kind of hackathon project.
So Whiteblock's reason, overall focus is to do these stress tests.
Yeah, in a way, they're doing a stress test. They do other kind of tests as well, either with their testing platform that I didn't really explore much. But the one thing that I caught my attention were like the client, the stress tests. I mean, and even Zach, I talked to Zach, who's the CEO of Whiteblock, who's like, he was really excited about ETC. He wanted to mine ETC. He wanted to come to the community. He was like, and I showed him around and stuff, and we promoted his company and what they're doing with the Nazgul testnet. Because, I mean, they ran it on their servers. They really didn't have to. At an East Berlin hackathon, which is really cool. And knowing that everyone, uses Whiteblock is, and you have Akri as well helping out. He ran a few things, and I built a little dashboard here and there. But we need to write like a Medium post about it, I think, so people know what happened at Nazgul.
And what's the continuation of that work with Nazgul and Whiteblock for ETC?
So Whiteblock right now, they're doing they're working with Classic Gut via ChainSafe and ETC Labs. So they already had an ETC presence with Classic Gut. They Classic Gut gets tested on Whiteblock. The continuation of after Nazgul is Apri at the ETC Summit, which is happening October 3rd and 4th, is going to be talking about a proposal for a new testnet. No more Morden, no more Nazgul, no more Kensington, which I thought had a really bad name. I was like, why would you call that, But he's going to propose a new testnet at the ETC Summit in 2 weeks and stuff.
Okay. So ultimately, Whiteblock's good for, would you say, is it specifically for smart contract platforms, or would it be for any consensus?
I think more for clients, like the actual clients running the network, like blockchain, like Parity, got EOS, Pantheon, and other ones and stuff. I'm not sure if they do anything smart contract related other than generate transaction from random.
Would they be testing like Bitcoin Core or one of the other clients for
I'm not sure if they have Bitcoin Core on it. They could be, but I'm not sure. If they have Bitcoin Core.
Yeah, I want to make a shout out to Whiteblock. I mean,
Yeah, no, they're like great. They're a great
they
team.
contributed their time and their, as you said, the servers, and they didn't have to, especially during the hackathon. I remember the picture. It was a bunch of you guys like behind, like in jail or something.
Yeah, that's at Factory. I wasn't actually in that photo. I was like downstairs trying to put out another fire, a few other fires. But like, they're like, behind the jail and stuff. Which is kind of funny because people started joking, oh, because you're building on ETC, they locked you up at ETH Berlin. Which is kind of like a funny joke.
You get flack. Do you get flack from the Ethereum guys when you're at these conferences?
I know which ones I don't want to talk to. And I try to avoid those. But the majority of them, even though we argue on Twitter, they're like the friendliest people in the world. Like, they're like, I'm happy to call them my friends or like even close acquaintances,
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it's interesting how even in this space where we all agree on certain, like, what was it? What did he say? Our core values in the cryptocurrency space.
By Vlad Zamfir.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, why did you bring Bitcoin into it? I was like the Vlad Zamfir talking about Bitcoin as part of their core values. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought you guys hated Bitcoin, like you hated the whole idea of Bitcoin and the core values of Bitcoin and stuff. But I agree with them on one thing.
Chain in that comparison too. So to be fair, it was a very broad core values.
Very broad, but like I agree with him that Libra, whatever Libra is, it doesn't share those values at all. Like,
yeah, I'm thankful for Libra, honestly, because it takes away a lot of the regulatory attention on most of the projects. Whatever, it's almost like this this voodoo doll scapegoat kind of, all of that attention can go there, and everybody else can just focus and build.
Yeah, I mean, what was crazy is like in the House, like a Congress, and people like talking about shitcoin versus Bitcoin and about how Libra is definitely a shitcoin, like based on like what they're trying to imply and stuff. But I think I just don't trust anything by Mark Zuckerberg. I worked before in a startup that used to deal with Facebook. I did work during the presidential election. I did data analysis using Facebook data and Twitter data. They do have a lot of data. Like Facebook kind of like, and when Cambridge Analytica came out, it even affected us because we like, what Facebook did was started blaming everything on developers using their API. They're like, we're going to cut off all this data from you guys because you're misbehaving, not to us, but like to the whole developer community.
Yeah.
But nobody at Facebook said, oh, we're going to stop collecting that data from users to begin with. They never said that. They said, oh, we're going to still collect that data, but we're just not going to share with you.
I'm going to pass it off, yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, looks like a blame on developers after. So all that shit, when I look at it, and then Libra comes along, I'm like, no. Like, I don't trust that guy. That guy's like, I can't trust anything that Zuckerberg touches.
Yeah, people like, that have worked in the space, I think are at that extreme level of distrust where it's affected your relationship with any product that comes out from that team, from that direction, from that leadership. But at the same time, I still feel like from a greater population, no one gives a shit. The trust is still one of these things that they don't measure, they don't quantify.
Yeah. For the average person, I don't think they care. But when you look at the governments, like France and Germany said they're going to ban Libra in their countries. A bunch of other countries I think Facebook has a meeting today with 30 different countries, including the US and Europe. They're like the banking representative to try to convince them why Libra is a good idea, when I don't think it's going to work out. But you're right. if you look at what Libra is trying to do, basically, I mean, and you're based in Shanghai, you'd be familiar with this WeChat. They're trying to replicate the WeChat model, where you have WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, and now you have payment using a shit token called Libra between all three, and it's going to improve like Facebook bottom line. So in the West, I don't see it as anyone going to adopt Libra or they're going to be allowed. But if you have like third world countries or like developing countries that are like, their citizens, they maybe never seen Venmo, they've never seen any of those other tools where you can send money between each other very easily. And then maybe Facebook comes up along and say, oh, you have a Facebook account, here's 20 Libra, $20 worth of Libra to, mess around and stuff. Then you can see that kind of adoption.
It does address that space, right? I mean, ultimately, in New York, you could use Venmo the way that Libra is proposing to be used, right?
And you don't even need a blockchain to use Venmo. It's so convenient. Like, you don't need to, I don't need to wait X number of confirmation. I just blame it on Venmo if anything goes wrong. And, take a class action lawsuit if anything. But hopefully we don't go there.
And I know recently there's been a lot of talk, speculation around initial country offerings. That the idea is now, because of Libra, it's turned on this idea that all the sovereign nations, countries now have started this race towards who's going to build their crypto first. And Marcus from Facebook was, responding about how Libra doesn't threaten that because they won't be able to issue their own Libra without a change in their basket of currencies. So, I really don't know where this is going to go. You're right in the fact that there's no trust from the early adopters. So it seems to me that's dead in the water.
Can you find me one person who's really excited about Libra who's not paid by Facebook? Because I want to meet them. I do want to get their idea. We can't find them. Nobody's excited. You have people who are excited about XRP because their bags are heavy and stuff, or because of maybe they believe in Ripple. And that I find more justifiable than believing Mark Zuckerberg and stuff. No one is buying their shit and stuff. And I don't know, the whole trust, you're right, in the sense that you need early adopters if you want people to use their technology, but who's going to use it? I mean, look at India. India, a few years ago, they denied access to Facebook to provide limited internet for free all over India using their, I think it was using either satellite or some balloon shit, right? But it's limited. It's free, but it's limited because it's only specific site that Facebook had access to track your data. And India, the government rejected it. They're like, we don't need your shit. Just kind of either surveillance and charity wise and all that kind of stuff. They thought so that is it shows you that people in the, other countries, not necessarily the West, there is a distrust of Facebook. And I think that is a good thing. And it should continue to be a good thing. Facebook, as well, they can't even access China. There's no way they can get into China. So if you don't have China, you don't have India, the majority of the West is against you. Who's left? Latin America and Africa. I can see a market existing there with people from poorer countries who they have a Facebook account and get free Libra and stuff, but is this really the main market that Facebook is after? They want to control Africa. It sounds just so evil, the overload of those two continents. I don't know. So I don't know. I just think Facebook had a lot of money to experiment, and that's great, but I don't think it's going to go far.
Yeah, there was also rumors that originally they wanted to use Bitcoin, but it doesn't have the transaction speeds that we want and the scalability, blah, blah, blah. Part of me, I created this fictional story in my mind where Zuckerberg's a really nice guy and he's helping Bitcoin by creating this, little distraction over here and then, you've got those moments in Congress where they compare shit coins to Bitcoin, because really, if from a zoom out, I think it's net positive for the space. I think it's
Yeah.
net positive for Bitcoin. Anytime that we're getting more people to focus on, hey, this is the safe one to go into, because we all have friends who want to enter the space and then they say, have you heard about Ripple? Like, dude, please, like, I got you in here. Just go through that door. Don't go through this door.
Don't fall for that door, right?
Yeah, like, you came into it's awesome. You came into the right place. Now just go through this one. Don't go in that way. So I wanted to talk about Ethercluster. I think that's a big deal that hasn't gotten
A lot
as
of
much attention as it deserves.
yeah, Ethercluster, which I built, I'm very proud of it. Basically, is an open source alternative to Infura. Infura is like in the Ethereum world. Infura is the main application that everyone connects to, in order to connect to the blockchain, because it provides you a free endpoint, so you don't have to run your node like on your computer. You can just connect to a URL, and then voila, you connected to the blockchain for free. And that was Infura. Um, Infura was also called the secret weapon of Ethereum. And I'm like, bullshit. I just open source your entire back end, you know? And now they're in trouble right now, in my opinion, because they're trying to monetize with Infura Plus, and give you you get faster performance if you pay X amount per month, and they have several tiers. But at the end of the day, you're paying more than if you can run your own Ethercluster. So Ethercluster, in my opinion, like my design with very open source using the latest tools, is basically an open source alternative to Infura. It works on ETC, it works on Ethereum, and anything that Parity supports. And I'm adding soon I'll add multi-get and other things. And it has a lot of cool stuff that you can add on to it that are not necessarily provided by Infura. And you can think of it as your dApp, scalable backend for your dApp, using the blockchain and stuff. And for people who don't understand how Infura, what does it do? Imagine you're at a party, right? Or you're hosting a party and you have 5 friends come over, right? And everyone wants to connect to the Wi-Fi. So you have a router, right? You give them the password, 5 people connect to the Wi-Fi, everyone's on the Wi-Fi happy. Now imagine 5 more people come and they want to connect to the Wi-Fi. What happens to the internet? The speed slows down, right? So basically, imagine you create a system where you automatically dispense another Wi-Fi router to the next 5 people who want to come and connect to it to maintain that kind of fast speed and give them connection to Wi-Fi. Now imagine it's not the Wi-Fi, but it's the blockchain. And that's what it is for developers.
That's a good analogy. And
yeah,
you mentioned that Infura was referred to as the secret weapon for Ethereum.
Yeah, consensus calls it the secret weapon of Ethereum, but I mean, it's not a surprise that people in Ethereum, developers in Ethereum, love Ethercluster. People talk to me all the time. Competitors to Infura ask me about Ethercluster. A lot, competitors. They were talking to me about it. I'm like, yeah, just use it. I don't really care what your backend is. If you find it helpful, use it. If you have any problems, I'll help you out with them. But they're considered a secret weapon, but they're backed by all of what do you call it?
Why are they considered a secret weapon? And is that in comparison to another smart contract platform? Is that in comparison to Bitcoin? Why? What role? Now look. First, I want to summarize that if you're using Infura today, you really should be using Ethercluster because it's an open source version of Infura, and obviously you're going to be able to do the same thing a lot cheaper. But for people who don't understand the role that Infura plays,
mm-hmm.
why is it referred to as a secret weapon, or any of these node scalability solutions?
Ethereum is considered the best developer community in crypto. You have 1.2 thousand developers versus Bitcoin, which has 300, compared relatively speaking. A lot of these developers are smart contract or dApp developers. They want to build something quick, and they want to connect it to the blockchain to validate that it's working and stuff. They're not going to run parity or gap. They're not minor. They have no incentive to run a node because even if you're running a node to secure the blockchain, as a developer, it's like you don't need to. Like you don't, because you have other things you want to do for the blockchain, like build an app, right? So Infura provides a very the minimal amount of friction needed in order to get started with development. Why? Because instead of running a client in your computer and then connecting it to your code, you're just given a URL for free to use by Infura, and then automatically you have a connection to the Ethereum.
So it removes the hardware requirements, or it removes some of the setup requirements to get started with your dApp.
It removes the setup requirement that needs to be done on your computer. It removes the hardware requirement that you need to run it, and including the space that you have to store that Ethereum, database in it. And it increases your the likelihood of a developer to deploy an app to Ethereum, because it's so easy. You just one line, and you don't have to run anything else. You have one line, you connect it to Ethereum, and then you just build your code after that. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. It's kind of like connecting to our database, somewhere remotely or something else. You have it. You have your information done.
And now Ethercluster more or less replicates this ease of use.
Right. The minimal viable product is the same among Ethercluster and Infura. Infura has a lot of bells and whistles on top of it, like IPFS. You have analytics and stuff. They have a whole team. I'm just one developer, right?
Right, of course.
But the reason I open sourced it is so people can customize it and add a lot of things to it. So now you have people in ETC Labs Core. They're very interested in doing maybe in their free time or something, analytics on endpoints being used and sharing it, and then I can deploy it and stuff. Shane from he built recently the Jade Explorer. I told him we're working together and trying to containerize it, which use Docker. And once that's done, because I got caught up with a lot of other shit, but once that's done, I'll have it for every network on Ethercluster. You have a Jade Explorer for it, so you don't have to run your own. You'll have them all, which is really simple to do, but something we should be doing.
Now, a lot of people complain that Infura, leads towards centralization. Does Ethercluster?
It's literally the definition of centralization is Infura. Imagine all the dApps, decentralized apps. First of all, you're deploying it to your AWS account, all the hardware, all the software for your dApp. You're deploying it to your AWS account, which is probably located in one server farm in maybe in Virginia. That's the most popular one. At the same time, then you have a connection to Infura, which is another centralized endpoint, which also only deployed to AWS, right? And so you have double the amount of centralization. And then people we're calling it a dApp. Why? Because at the end of the day, you're connected to a decentralized network. Sure, but the way you connect to it is very centralized. So it kind of defeats the purpose.
Right.
So that is you have MetaMask, you have Gitcoin, you have everything connected to Infura, which is kind of scary. It's at the same time, Infura is only deployed on AWS, and AWS it's one company. So if you want to achieve true decentralization, you have to deploy your system on multiple clouds, like AWS, Google Cloud, and maybe Microsoft Azure Cloud. And that's the kind of the next step for Ethercluster. I want to deploy a smaller amount of nodes on different service providers together and connect them all, three of them, and open source the whole design so people can improve it and give me feedback on it. And that would create through kind of decentralization. And we open source it because if you're not satisfied that you have to connect to my endpoint, which is sort of centralized to begin with because I'm providing it for free, I open source the entire design so you can run your own. So you can run your own, and and that's what I wanted, people to decentralize it by running their own rather than connecting to mine. But you can still connect to mine. You're more than welcome to for testing.
Yeah, and if I were to, create my own endpoint, is there a business case around that, or am I doing that altruistically?
Depends on the kind of traffic that you're getting. Like if you're getting a lot of traffic, it's in your interest to run your own Ether cluster because you can then what do you call it? You can control it only dedicated to your DApp. Like let's say you're running a gambling DApp and stuff. You're probably going to get a lot of traffic, right? It will be more useful for you to run it on your own Ether cluster version rather than connect to the public one that is used for demoing. But if you're just building something for testing and you can't be bothered with building your own, you know, a scalable infrastructure from scratch, you can just connect to Ether cluster, like to the endpoint.
So this comes back to a lot of the stuff I discussed with Mache and Aaron, where it's like you want to be able to control, you know, the entire environment yourself. How does me running an Ether cluster instance differ from having an Ether node?
Ether is more decentralized. Because if you consider Ethernote from the point of view of like the box that they provide you, like the box, if you're running a box with like I would imagine like really good hardware, like maybe either in your office or something, and it had an endpoint that your apps that you deploy can connect to, you actually have more control over it, you know, rather than deploying it to a server farm in AWS or Google Cloud. You have like, it's actually like decentralized a bit more from the network because you have your own road running that you can hold and stuff. And if you do more of them and you distribute it, you can actually have it even more decentralized. So I really like Ethernote team because of like the whole box and stuff. And I think it's a great like project and stuff. We built Ethercluster just because we wanted to have an alternative to Infura because
I mean, ease of use, and not everybody's gonna have one of these boxes at home. It's just it's looking at the spectrum where if you have on this side Infura, it sounds like you have on this side Ethernode, and then Ethercluster is over here.
Right. I think if you take away the box business model and just talk about the Ethernode server, then we're sort of the same. Except that Ethercluster is more open source than Ethernode from that aspect, from the service provider. But obviously, Ethernode provides more services, and like you know, like you can create an account and stuff. You can't create an account with Ethercluster. I just demo the whole thing, and then you can just connect to it, look at the code, build your own, whatever.
Right. No, these are the building blocks. And as you said, the main goal was to make an open source version of Infura. You know, it's just, again, to show that there's this wide spectrum, even within, you know, decentralized world of Ethereum.
Right.
There's this wide spectrum of trust on how you execute on that decentralization. Do you go with the, you know, ease of use, a centralized approach, which is Infura, or do you go all the way on the other side of the spectrum where you've got your own, you know, box at home, and then you know you're in more control of the connections of your data, the sharing of your. So understanding that spectrum is important. Now, with the recent increase in gas limit, does that lean towards more reliance on an Infura model? Does that promote, is that irrelevant to the spectrum of trust? What happens as the gas limit starts to increase? How do node structures and incentive models change?
With the gas limit, I think if it increases the chain because you know miners gonna always opt out or opt in for the higher limit of the gas, right? So miners gonna always gonna go for the higher limit and stuff by default. And the chain will increase, and because of the chain increasing, people will definitely rely more on Infura because nobody wants to run a 2.5 terabyte chain on their hardware. Like, why would you? You know? And yeah, I think it's the kind of thing that I mean, like the only few people that I know that are running full archived nodes for Ethereum and Ethereum Classic are Google, because they have the hardware and stuff. You know, with Google BigQuery, the project that we worked on, they're the ones who are running it. But even the Ethereum Foundation is not running an archived node for Ethereum because it's too bloated, 2.5 terabytes. insane, you know?
Yeah.
So an increase in the gas limit is gonna bloat it to the point that nobody wants to run the damn thing anymore and stuff. So I don't know. Anthony's very against increasing the gas limit. I think it makes sense, but I think it's only a temporary solution. You should really start thinking about how do you want to scale, or like scalability on Ethereum Classic on layer 2, and things like Swarm and like maybe Plasma would make a lot of sense and stuff. And yeah.
Do you think that's an opportunity for ETC to make to differentiate itself even more, and make as Anthony's proposed, a change to the gas limit?
Like a decrease or an increase?
A decrease.
It's yes and no, because depends how much you decrease it by. If you decrease it by a lot, some contracts can't even be deployed because they run out of gas. They need
Right.
a lot more gas.
Right.
So I don't know what's the right answer, because like back in the day when Anthony brought it up, Afri was kind of against it because he said that it would like a lot of things can't be deployed or processed if you decrease it by a lot versus increase it. So I really don't know what the answer is. Like maybe decrease it by half and hope for the best. But like from my philosophy is you try to minimize the changes you make on the core level. Like I wrote like quantifying immutability because the whole idea is just like stop messing with the base layer. Like, or just modify it if you need technical maintenance. But I don't know, like I'm not really sold on either increasing or decreasing it. But I know that, given the current pace, we can end up like Ethereum is right now in a few years.
Yeah.
And like in terms of size, which is something we don't want. It's too bloated.
I think it's important that, you're one of the more influential members in the Ethereum Classic community.
Well, I don't know what I'm talking about. What are you saying?
I happen to talk about Ethereum Classic a lot just because of my previous role, and
Right.
doing the Ethereum Classic show. But
Show, but
thank you. I'm trying to make this one an even better.
Favorite host. He was my favorite host, Dean Pappas.
I'm trying to make this an even better show. So, crypto grown-ups, everyone.
Oh yeah.
But by the way, you're the first and only guest that I've interviewed on both shows.
Really? You didn't interview Anthony yet? On the previous? Oh, interesting.
No.
Ah, that's something that I can, use against him. Like, so
He never got that. Yeah, he never got that honor. Well, we can go into that off camera. But
right.
what I think it's very important that ETC differentiates itself even more, especially in these moments, right? So there's a lot of proposals that have been put out there. I know that the hard forks, even though they're bringing protocol upgrades, a lot of it is copy pasting, and I hate hearing that shit because it's right. At this point, there's proposals like Sankoff's SHA-3 KCAC change. There's the proposal that Anthony's put forward. These are the kind of things that really differentiate Ethereum Classic from Ethereum. However, there is a lot of discussion about what's going to happen once the ETH 2.0 happens. Where does all that hash rate go? So it's possible that this is the best time ever to wait and see what Ethereum does. But it is getting to a point where the differentiation is going to be important.
Right. I agree on a few things. I think when you add EIPs to Ethereum and when they look at it as ECIP, like Ethereum Classic is copying them, I think this is misguided, because if you look at it from a high level, it's just a technology stack, the Ethereum stack. And whether you want to run it on ETH, which is the main, or you want to run it on ETC, which is the classic chain, doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's open source tools. And ETC contributes a lot of things toward Ethereum that people use. I don't want to brag, but Ethercluster, and you have Project Gorley, which we funded, which is
Yeah,
we
the
funded before.
contributions that
Yeah,
ETC has made has not just been, surviving, like a lot of people have said. Uh,
right.
that's obviously bullshit. But
Yeah,
I like having multiple
new.
talking points, right? And I think a few of them that the immutability aspect has been the strongest one. That it's always been POW, it always will be POW. I'm more of a fan of the current monetary policy that Ethereum Classic has. A lot of people, they're
I'm
not.
not a fan of it, by the way.
I know. Um, and I think that that's a big enough topic that we can definitely
Yeah,
discuss another
but
time. But yeah, monetary policy is one of those things that a lot of these are legacy decisions, right? That's why I'm saying,
right.
this is a chance to do something fresh. At the same time, our space is not one that shines from rapid change, especially for based like I think the talk you're gonna give, you're gonna do the quantifying immutability talk at Summit,
Yeah,
right?
right. At East Berlin, I did the quantifying immutability topic. Um,
And you're gonna do that at the Summit too, correct?
no, at the summit, I'm gonna go over developer relations in Ethereum Classic about what we did over the year and like more like an update and how successful it is. And probably, I'm just trying to pitch myself in front of Bob to say, hey, I did a good job over the year.
I'm sure Bob knows very well. I mean,
Oh,
once you had the
yeah.
meme of Aquaman, dude, you were done for the year. You could have just gone over to Bermuda, taken some pictures, and you would have been done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you've done an excellent job. You've been a fantastic representative of Ethereum Classic. Where I
Yeah.
think the community is massively proud to have you, and you've tiptoed the line between the good cop, bad cop, trying to keep everybody in the peace extremely well. Is that something that you expected to have as a role coming into this space, that you would have to do this peacekeeper UN kind of stuff?
Babysitting people. Let's see. I kind of expected it around coordination for hardcore. So we have to, like at the cooperative, we have to do a lot of things, especially with developers and people running the software. I didn't expect that much drama. Like I've been in the E2C community since I think April 2017. But I haven't been active. Like, I mean, I've been active, like, in, hanging out and stuff. That's how I got to talk to Anthony initially. But I didn't get hired until October 2018. So there's a good year and a few months in between.
Oh, you came
Uh,
in right before the drama started.
oh yeah, I've seen all the drama. I've seen all the drama. Like, so drama is nothing new when it comes to ETC, but drama around Atlantis, which arguably is just like adopting the Byzantium code, which is like went well for Ethereum, and it
Yeah.
wasn't really controversial. Something I didn't expect. Like, and like all the back and forth and like the arguments over like when to do the hard fork, when not to do it and stuff. Like there was a period of time when um certain people wanted to push for an early hard fork, and that for me, I think that kind of broke me down, not too much, but in the sense that I'm like, I thought like we're gonna lose the network
Right.
because if like I thought by then there's like, I mean, look at it now. We had how many months ahead of time to talk, and you have one guy with like, he's still mining on the old chain. Imagine if you had just like 3 weeks to tell everyone. You
Right.
know,
It was, the good thing is that there was a lot of coordination that had happened ahead of time. So it was just like, hey, let's reconfirm that this person remembers. Let's reconfirm. Um, I honestly was surprised how well it went. I mean, looking at how poorly some of the Ethereum ones had gone, as far as like, oh, wow, not everybody knew. That might be the difference of the size of the network as well. Like, it's difficult to really compare the apples to oranges.
right. I think, but from Ashley's point of view, like, I mean, from like, seeing how Ashley is like monitoring and stuff, maybe because miners on Ethereum, they're actually more concentrated the same way ETC is, because it's all mining pools. You just talk to the mining pool and they update it for everyone else and stuff. I think it wasn't gonna be as big a deal, because I think a lot of people just like focus a lot on Ethereum news and stuff and much less on ETC. So they would have been more aware and stuff. But even Ethereum does 9 months between hard forks. So
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I remember there was a time when there was a U-turn because not enough nodes had updated.
hmm I think that was Constantinople. I'm not. I don't
I
remember.
think so
But yeah,
too. No, and
yeah.
so everything went very well.
I was
Dude,
happy.
I
Yeah.
just realized this has been an hour, and it's gonna be
Oh,
hard. Yeah, it's when it gets to an hour long, it means two things. One, we have a lot more to talk about, and two, people are gonna have to do their best to concentrate through the whole talk. So,
yeah. I mean,
so we're gonna wrap it up here, brother. Uh,
listen, could I give a final thing to say before?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, for everyone listening, you should definitely check out the ETC Summit, October 3rd and 4th in Vancouver. You have Donald McIntyre coming. You got Charles Hoskinson coming. There's a great mining panel coming up. You got Virgil from the Ethereum Foundation, and you got Bob, you got Anthony. Everyone's going to be there. So definitely check it out.
All-Star cast. We're gonna put all the information and the details as well. Yaz is going to be there also, and it's in Vancouver, so there's a lot of cool stuff you can do, meeting some cool people.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun, guys.
Awesome. Dude, thank you for your time, and we're going to circle back and do this again soon to cover all the other topics.
Hell yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care, bro.
All right, dude.